another minute or two then.
It's like the three of us make up the two.
Well, why don't we get started? At least we can do some of the non-action items and we can get going here and see if we get a quorum here before we start on all of the action items. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:04 on June 28th, 2023. This is a regular meeting of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. And we have a bit of an agenda today, quite a number of action items to go through, as well as some informational items. So I'll begin at the top of our agenda, and it looks like we now have Commissioner Beach as well, so we probably do have a quorum at this point. We'll find out here in a moment. We begin by starting off with calling the meeting to order, and let's take roll, if you wouldn't mind doing that, Ryan, and see where we're at.
Sure. So Commissioner Auxier, we know had an absence. Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
I'm here today.
Commissioner Solomon, okay, Representative Lewis,
I'm here.
Senator Brzezinski, and Vice Chair Bovet.
Present. So it looks like we're still waiting for one more for the full quorum. All right. Well, let's begin then with the public comments, and then we'll skip to the last two items and see where we're at after that. So first off, as we always do, we open it up for comments from any member of the public who wishes to speak with the Criminal Justice Commission on any topic not on our agenda. Is there anyone present here? If you would raise your hand or make yourself known that you would like to chat with the commission, now would be that time. And not seeing any hands or other folks coming off mute. We'll need to skip past the next four items because they all do require action, and I'm reticent to begin this conversation until we have a suite of folks. But we do have a skip update as well as agency updates, which I imagine would involve legislation that just passed the legislature here last week. So why don't we start with that, if that's okay, Ryan? That kind of puts you on the spot for talking about the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program update. If you wouldn't mind starting in on that, and we'll see if we can gather another commissioner between now and by the time you're done.
Happy to do so. And we also have an informational specialty courts that we can work toward as well.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, I saw that. So, and Rachel's here too. So
Yeah.
if either one of you that wants to go first on those informational sessions, happy to take either one now.
Rachel, why don't you go ahead just as for following along with the agenda.
Sure.
So we're here at Specialty Court Grant Program Update 2325.
All right. Vice Chair Bovet, can you see that? All right. So good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Rachel MacArthur, and I'm a policy analyst for CJC. Today, I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the 2325 Specialty Court Grant Program. We have made quite a few changes, so I just want to give you an update as to where we are currently and where we are going to go. So no decision needs to be made today. It's just to give you all an update. So this is just an illustration of how the program operates according to the different roles, CJC staff, the grant review committee, and then the commission. We are currently like almost to the last check mark on the grant review committee section, and then we will be moving over. I'll give an update on next steps with the commission as well. So we have made quite a bit of progress with this grant program within the last couple of months. And kind of going back to the very beginning, we spoke with grantees, we spoke with potential applicants, we spoke with stakeholders and wanted to get feedback on the grant program in general. And we received very consistent feedback for the need for more consistency, transparency, and efficiency with this program moving forward. And so we wanted to build a more reliable and stable foundation for this program so that it can become a little bit more predictable for applicants as we move through grant cycles. And so it's not something that they have to worry about what's going to be required or kind of not have a lot of transparency in terms of what's expected to them as they go through grant cycles. And so we broke up this application into two parts. There's a preliminary application, which just happened. It included a narrative. We did have some required documentation for them to submit. We also put an emphasis on the quantitative aspect of this grant program, which I'll get into a little bit in terms of what that looked like. And then also built a final application, which will include the funding requests from each applicant. So for CJC staff, our job was to analyze the preliminary applications, and we scored these based on their adherence to standards. Felt like it was really important to anchor this grant program into the specialty court standards, best practices. And so that provides a foundation, not only for this round, but moving forward, the courts are going to have a little bit better idea of where they are in terms of best practices and have a little bit better idea of where they can improve. And so instead of also grouping these preliminary applications by counties, we group them by court type to have a little bit more consistency in what we were looking at in terms of best practices, because we recognize there's differences between drug courts, mental health courts, family treatment courts, et cetera. So we wanted to give each court type the opportunity to consider, we wanted to consider the nuance of each different court type, which is why we analyzed them that way. And so for the quantitative part, we looked at SCMS data, which is a specialty court management system. We did pull data from there as part of our analysis. And then we also worked with OJD. They have something called the SCOP, and it's the Specialty Court Operating Profile, and they have each court complete this. And so we used that as well to develop this score sheet, and it provided an in-depth look for each court to know exactly what they're doing right and what they're doing well, and then where there are areas for improvement as we move through this grant cycle and then continue through other grant cycles. And then from that analysis, the grant review committee was able to provide guidance or feedback for any funding requests. And so I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like coming up. So this is an example of this score sheet. Hopefully you all can see that a little bit. What we did was we took every standard, and in order for there to be a foundation that we felt was fair and the expectations were pretty clear, we didn't score everything because we just we didn't feel like we could ask them of things without having expected it already. And so what I mean by that is we tried to build a foundation on things that they should be doing, the best practices, and then we'll continue to build on that as we move through this biennium into the next grant cycle. So each applicant got this score sheet along with feedback from the grant review committee. And the idea is that they use this as a bit of a roadmap going through the next 2 years to know where they're at and then how they can continue to improve. And so this is something that not only CJC staff will continue to come back to, but OJD, their specialty court team, will also utilize this as well, because it did come from, part of it came from the specialty court operating profile. So this is something that the grantees and the applicants can continue to utilize as they move through this next biennium. And then we provided, based on their scores, we provided a level of analysis to the grant review committee. So those that scored high, we used a mean, and then we used a standard deviation from that mean to group these. And the reason why we used that particular statistic is it was a very objective way to do this, and it split it in a way that we felt was the fairest and most objective way to do it. So the abbreviated analysis for those that scored high, this is what we presented to the grant review committee. Courts that scored in the middle, which there was an expectation that most courts would fall in the middle, kind of like a bell curve. So they would get a standard analysis with just a little bit more information presented to the grant review committee. And then those that were on the low end got additional analysis where we went into a little bit more detail on some things, particularly data and also spending patterns throughout the current biennium to present to the grant review committee. So just as an example, this is how the adult drug courts fell and their distribution along with scores and how we prepared the analysis for the grant review committee for drug courts. So again, we expected most courts to be in that standard analysis, and most courts were. And this was consistent across different court types as well. The majority of applicants did receive that standard analysis. And then we asked the grant review committee to provide very specific and focused feedback that would be helpful to the applicants. And so again, anchoring it into adherence to standards and best practices, providing feedback that would help applicants improve or meet those standards throughout the next biennium. And also recognizing that this grant cycle, we have more applicants than last time and a little bit less funding available. We recognize that there's a need to fill a resource gap, right? And to be very intentional and deliberate about where CJC funds go. And so really just focusing on how we can help courts operationalize those standards, and also allowing for nuance and context across those standards. So across those courts. So we recognize that there are specific needs based on where the court is geographically, access to resources, stakeholders, and things like that. And so the feedback that the grant review committee gave to the applicants took that into consideration as well. And then also two things that the grant review committee requested just as general feedback to every applicant is that treatment funds align with the rate of the provider. And this is something every court is required to accept OHP. And so it's really looking at those non-billable hours and making sure that they're consistent. So the treatment funds are going towards what they need to be going to rather than kind of going into this vague box and hoping that they're being used correctly. So we're going to be tracking that. And then also appropriate FTE funding requests for coordinators, for court coordinators, to continue the operationalization of these standards. And so we recognize, CJC staff recognizes that court coordinators are an integral part of the specialty court team. And we just want to make sure that the FTE request matches the needs of each court across counties. So this is an example of the feedback that was given to applicants after the grant review committee met. This is very similar to the letter that applicants in the JRI program receive as well. So this just went through what standards weren't met. They also at the same time received their scorecard. And so they could see, look at their scorecard, look at the standards that were not indicated not met on this letter, match them up, and then the feedback was very specific on how to address those standards to obtain best practices. And again, kind of going back to recognizing that courts need specific things based on their situation and their context. The feedback was specific, but also we recognize that courts may ask for these things in different ways. And so that's something that in the analysis of the budget, the budget projection sheet that they're going to submit that we will consider when we present this to the grant review committee. And then so we are here on Friday. They're going to submit their final application, grantees are, and they're going to submit a budget projection sheet with their budget requests for the next biennium. And then they're also going to have an opportunity to update any information in their preliminary application, whether it be that something has changed in the last couple of months for them, or the grant review committee specifically asked for something. And then on the 19th of July, the grant review committee will review final applications and make funding recommendations. They will be analyzed by court type. And then there is going to be this consideration of how the funding requests align with the feedback provided in the preliminary application. So that will be part of the analysis. And then on July 28th, very quick turnaround, you all will be making funding decisions on the 23-25 specialty court grant program. And I did have one question, Vice Chair Bovet. We are planning on presenting it to you all as court types, and instead of counties like it's been done in the past. But I also understand that there's kind of a, historically commissioners have abstained from making any sort of decisions on their respective counties. And so I wanted to see if it was okay if we continued with the analysis by court type, but rather than pulling out those individual courts. So for example, Lane County has 4 different court types. Washington County has 2, that it's okay that we present all of the different court types and then ask the commission at the end to make a decision on those funding requests and then, or recommendations, and then pull out those courts at the end, if that's okay.
That would be actually my preference as well.
Okay.
I'll open it up to other commissioners if they have a different preference. That's the most efficient way to get it done, is what you just described. So if folks have a different preference, let us know. That allows us to essentially make one big motion to approve everything except for the specific counties that each of us are assigned to, and then we can have separate motions on those in which each of us can abstain on the appropriate one.
Okay. All right, then we will proceed that way. So
Any other commissioners have any thoughts, or are you all okay proceeding that way? Commissioner Beach?
No, forgive me, Chair. It actually is another question, but I have no issue with our plan moving forward.
Great, go ahead with your question. Oh, I guess we should ask Rachel, are you finished? Is this your last slide?
yes, that's all I have. Yep.
Perfect. Go ahead, Commissioner.
So just a couple questions for Rachel, if I may. So I was curious, what, if yet, the specialty court grant CJC budget has been finalized, and if it has, what that number was?
Yeah, Vice Chair Bovet, Commissioner Beach, that's a great question. The budget just passed at our current service level. And so we're coming in, and Ryan may have more specific numbers, maybe in his presentation, but coming in at about 15.5 million, about that. So it's current service level. And then we are going to see we don't know what the total ask is going to be among applicants. And so we're going to try to supplement some of that if we need to with federal funds. We just don't know that amount yet. There's other things to consider with that. And so definitely at current service level with general funds, and then possibly supplementing it a little bit with the federal funds.
Thank you, Rachel. And then additionally, you'd mentioned that there'd actually been more applications than received in past years. I was just curious if you might be able to share how many applications this year versus last.
Yeah, so last year we ended up with, I believe, 49, and then we had 4, I believe, in the supplemental round, 5, maybe 4 in the supplemental round. And then this year, or not supplemental, I'm sorry, implementation round. And then this year we have 52 applicants in this round, and then potentially 2 that I'm aware of implementation courts.
Thank you. And then lastly, forgive me, this is more a technical question. I think I see there July 28th as the next commission meeting. I actually have it on my calendar as the 27th, which is a
No.
Thursday. So I
Yes,
just want to
you're
make sure I
correct.
have it.
I
Okay,
apologize. That is correct, on July 27th, yes.
okay,
Sorry
I
about
will be
that.
there. I would have been there either way. But
Sorry
I just
about
wanted
that.
to make sure. Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Rachel on the specialty court grant program update? Not seeing any. I just have one real quick comment. I think I do this every year and I'll do it again, which is just a caution to folks that are looking at our data around specialty court programs. It would be really easy to just say, hey, the only data point that matters is successful completion rate, but that would be terribly misleading because many of these specialty court programs are really designed to help and work with the most high risk of folks. And therefore, if you show me a perfect drug court, I'll show you one that probably isn't entering high risk folks. So be careful with that particular data point. That needs to be weighted and considered with everything else. So we generally take the hard cases, in other words, in specialty courts, which is what the specialty courts are designed for. So we will see a certain percentage of failure rates just as a natural result of using evidence-based best practices. So I'll end my comment there. I think I do that once a year. All right. So do we have a quorum yet, Ryan, with Commissioner Solomon, or should we go on to the next non-action item?
Unfortunately, we do not. We're doing some outreach, but we should continue with the non-action.
Great. Well, then you're on. We're up to Burn State Crisis Intervention Program, the SCIP update.
And give me one moment just to get situated here. Okay, you see a slide with Burn Skip on the front of it? Excellent. This will be short. I just have one slide to kind of give you an update on where we're at in the development of the advisory board for this federal grant. So as by way of background, Burn Skip is State Crisis Intervention Program, new federal funding focused on the reduction of gun violence. One of the first requirements after or as part of the application and receiving the award is standing an advisory board. There were some specification within the solicitation as to who needed to be involved. You all as a body provided additional recommendations on which perspectives you would like on that board. And we have those perspectives then listed here on the screen. To date, there are 14 of these positions we will consider filled, the asterisks being that we're still trying to get confirmation the individuals do in fact want to and can participate. They had expressed interest, they had provided a commitment, but now that we've made some of those selections, particularly in the non-system areas, we want to make sure that they are in fact ready to begin the work. And so you can see we've made pretty good headway. There are a couple of positions that we have not yet received a nomination or someone as an suitable to fill the role. But the majority, as you see, or two of the four are from the legislature. We did make agency recommendations, and it is a part of the appointment, ask for appointments. That was initially, I think, projected for mid-May. As we all know, that was certainly not prioritized given more pressing issues. And so we anticipate maybe here now in the interim that those appointments will be made. And we then are doing our outreach as it relates to tribal government and a behavioral health provider. Otherwise, we do have someone situated for each of these respective areas, or at least each of these respective areas are met, recognizing that in some of the non-system or the non-traditional roles, there's often overlap. We have multiple individuals who have unfortunately, been impacted by violence in their life, and we have multiple people, as an example, who are registered gun owners. So we do have multiple of these areas as it relates to individuals. That said, we are moving forward with orientation planning, trying to schedule up a meeting for July, August with the group. And what that meeting will likely look like initially is informational. We're continuing to coordinate with other state partners where there are existing efforts related to gun violence underway, both from a data collection perspective, whether it be on serious injury or death associated with guns, or some of the emergency protection order data for the state. We're working to build presentations or have presentations made to this advisory group on the initial meeting or two. And then the other piece is, as I said, existing programs or legislatively funded programs that are underway throughout the state that correlate so that we can identify where maybe gaps exist and or avoid duplicating efforts with funding available in our state. So that's all I have by way of an update for Skip. Are there any questions?
Great, thanks, Ryan. Any questions of Ryan? This particular update, we've been working on this for a little while.
Yeah.
Not seeing any questions. I think that's great. I guess you're up again. Agency update. I think that's our last non-action item. So I guess take your time.
I will do my best. Share screen here once more. Oh, I take that back. I don't have slides for this, so no need to share that screen. Just have my face. So as you alluded to, Vice Chair Bovet, we just wanted to give an update for the agency as it relates to the close of session and the agency's budget and or other funding initiatives and projects that came as a result of the Legislative Assembly. So starting at the top of the list, what we have is the extension and continued funding for the Justice Reinvestment Program. That amount we had hoped to get, I guess, proportioned out from all of you today by way of a funding table. We may have to postpone that decision, but in total, CSL with a little bit of adjustment for year biennium inflation or otherwise comes in at roughly $53.9 million. That should amount to roughly 45.9 in grant funding underneath the formula grant and approximately 8.1 for the competitive downward departure grant program. And then just again to note that Senate Bill 344 did in fact pass, which extends justice reinvestment another 10 years or to 2033. Yes, I was very happy to receive that news. Moving to the next program, the illegal marijuana market enforcement grants did also get an add as a part of Senate Bill 5506, the end of session bill. So in addition to our agency budget and allocation of $6 million, there'll be an additional $5 million that will be put towards or into this grant fund for disbursement this biennium as well. That as by way of reminder, after last short session, or no, pardon me, it was a special session that that serves both cities, counties, and law enforcement, but also community-based organizations focused in on the humanitarian impacts of these operations. And so we are, of course, kind of working through all of the dust settling on all of these things, but we were looking at both where our grantees are currently at and where best to utilize the amount of funding. We were fortunate to be able to secure this biennium for that program. To further clarify your question, Commissioner Beach, as it relates to specialty courts, that was also continued as part of our agency budget as the passage of House Bill 5505. That number is 15.9 million is the total number for special court in state funds. A portion of that, roughly 600,000, is lottery funds specific for veterans courts. So there's a little bit of a separation there as it relates to funding. That's not dissimilar from what we've received in the past as well. And it reiterate what Rachel said, we'll take a look at evaluating what federal funds we can utilize to supplement either the competitive grant or the implementation round as we move forward. The impacts grant, which is that one that nobody likes to say the full name, but hopefully we all know the impacts by what it does, which is to address the needs of individuals who are high utilizers of criminal justice or the health care system. And in a number of projects at this point, we have 15 grantees around the state. That was, had the good fortune of that being added to the Christmas tree bill as well, at the amount of $10 million for the grant program for this new biennium. So we're very excited to see that program continued as well. It was looking a little risky at the earlier stages of session and some of the budgeting process. And so like marijuana, we'll be looking into how best to utilize the funding. In both of those cases, I should have said that with marijuana. Grantees currently have an amount of funding that carries them roughly towards 2024. So we'll be looking at what is needed to fill their gaps as well as in what ways expansions may be possible. Before I move to some of the other projects, I will note that what this list doesn't include is Restorative Justice Grant Program. That program did not receive additional funding out of this legislative session. And so we will be working with our grantees. We've made notice to them so that they're aware. They too do have some funding that allowed them to stretch to currently their project periods were through December of this year. We'll be looking at ways in which to expand or stretch the funding that they currently have allocated to them in hopes of extending those programs longer so that there may be other opportunities to pursue and secure funding for the program. So moving out of the grant world slightly as it relates to existing programs, the Family Preservation Project, which we've for a number of years have participated and passed through funding, that has been extended as well underneath the Christmas tree bill. That's a $650,000 grant that will go directly to the YWCA, who operates that program out of Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. And then last of the existing programs list is the U-Visa reporting program that was in essence continued. There was a little bit of a lull as it closed out as a result of prior legislation, but it's now been renewed and is and will continue through to 2027 at this point. Pause questions about the existing programs before I talk about some new projects.
Any questions of Brian about how we got funded and didn't get funded on certain programs that we have existing? No, I'll just add a comment on the IMM EGP. It was substantially less than the House Bill 3000 task force asked for. So, but we have been told that we should try to stretch it out as best we can and possibly address the e-board because it would be a shame to see all the progress we've made go by the wayside and the drug trafficking organizations come back into full bloom with all the victims they create. But we'll address that as time marches on. All right, do we have any new programs that you want to talk about?
Just a couple I'd like to highlight. This is all new to the agency, so we don't have, of course, a lot of details as it relates to what it'll look like. That'll be our task now that session has ended and the new biennium is upon us. But one is a new grant program. It was created as a part of Senate Bill 900 to address organized retail theft. There's a grant program that provides assistance to local cities and counties, the state police, as well as community-based organizations to address organized retail theft, as I mentioned. Is a grant program of $5 million, an allocation of $5 million, so roughly 4 point something in the higher, and will be available to recipients once we put that program together. It will take some time to do so as a new program. We have to go through the rulemaking process initially, and then of course the development of the solicitation and everything else. But a new program and a new area of public safety for us to explore. Another new program is the Juvenile Justice Policy Commission. I know we've updated along the way about this. It has taken some different forms over the session, but as a result of House Bill 2320, this will be a 17-member body that will operate within or within the organization, and a number of requirements related to meeting or otherwise, but the goal and directive is to develop recommendations related to juvenile justice system and specifically improvements maybe related to law and policy, practice, or other types of appropriations that could enhance youth outcomes, public safety, etc. Those are our governor appointed positions. So of course we'll be looking at starting that process to have the identified seats for that commission filled. There were positions allocated to the agency to support that work. So we will begin that process as well internally to increase our capacity and our ability to support this new commission. 2 more to go. The Christmas tree bill included a request and some funding to support a study on the advantages, disadvantages of decriminalizing prostitution. And so that work will get underway. The study is due by way of a report to the legislature in September of 2024. And then lastly, as a part of Senate Bill 337 related to the public defense crisis and adjustments in those services, there is a portion that requires the judicial districts to submit a plan to address the public defense challenges in their jurisdictions. Those plans are submitted to the CJC for some degree of analysis, and then a report then returns to the legislature on any findings. That's all scheduled far more rapidly. That's for this year. So those plans will be due to the agency in September of 2023. Our report to legislature then is due in October. And that is my list.
Just a short list, eh?
Just a few things.
Well, CJC staff will definitely be quite busy here. We had a busy legislative session, and I'll just make this comment just generally. That's the risk of being a high functioning, effective state agency, is they dump programs and money on you because they want more effectiveness, which makes perfect sense, but it is what it is. All right, any questions or comments for Ryan on what we've just heard in terms of our program updates and the new programs we'll be starting? I say Representative Lewis, Commissioner Lewis, or Chief Lewis, or whatever hat you're wearing at the present.
There were several times during this session where comments were made about the continuing to load up responsibilities to the CJC without sufficient funding. And so I think there is a recognition, at least among some in the legislature, that we've got to be a little bit more conscious of that going forward. So there were some good things that didn't get funded this time. And I do believe that the e-board may be an avenue to try to get some of that money back. But CJC has got a number of tasks to deal with, and Senate Bill 337 responsibilities. There were some things that were also, there were 4 budget notes in the criminal justice, in the criminal defense bill. There were 4 budget notes in there about some things that the legislature is very interested in making sure get accomplished on a short term. I think that the September deadline for those plans may be a little bit too ambitious, but I would not be surprised if at the end of September during Ledge Days, if there isn't some request for an informational hearing on the status of those plans. So it's an ambitious undertaking, and I think we need to lend all the support we can to the staff at CJC going forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? All right, well, that completes the informational part of our agenda. We have 4 action items. Do we have, by chance, Commissioner Solomon here with us? No.
Not appears so.
I'm very reluctant to even begin one of these because the risk is you'd have to repeat yourself when we have a quorum. So I'm looking for suggestions from staff, but my temptation is to suggest we end this meeting and then maybe have a special meeting next week sometime when we can ensure a quorum. But I'm not sure what the timing is on any of these things, Ryan. What's the critical timing points on these 4 items?
Yeah, it's not ideal for a couple of them. Some of the items can wait. So I think we can explore, maybe we can do a poll of availability if there's availability for another meeting to work through those. If not, though, quite frankly, we can get to the 27th It does in most of these cases, what it means is just kind of delaying release of certain information and or decision related to the specific topics. And so if that, as an option, if that's what you'd like to do, we could poll for a special meeting in hopes of something sooner, or just hold off. I would add a caveat that the 27th meeting will be, if they are held over, it will be a pretty stacked meeting in the event, because we have those items plus at minimum the specialty court grant decisions.
My temptation is to adjourn this meeting and then really to defer to staff, to defer to you and Ken on deciding if we can stack up the 27th or if there is an opportunity to insert one in between, if that's what you want. But I'm happy to take input from any of the other commissioners about your preferences in that regard, but it doesn't look like we can move forward with the action items here today. Any thoughts? Well, I think that's what we're gonna probably have to do, Ryan, and as the acting chair, I'll just defer to you and Ken in terms of deciding if you want to insert another meeting in between now and July 27th to take care of some of the items, or if we just want to stack it up on the 27th. I see Commissioner Freeman popped up here too. Any thoughts, Commissioner Freeman or Commissioner Beach or Commissioner Lewis?
I agree with your direction.
Okay.
Agreed. Vice Chair.
All right. Well, we've been at this for 44 minutes. I think I'm going to adjourn this at 1:45, and we will reconvene either sometime between now and the 27th, and we will do proper notice, of course, or I'll see you all on July 27th. And have a great rest of your week, and congratulations to Representative Lewis on being done with the 2023 legislative session. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.